get in and into your seats at your tables in time for when sessions start, and then we can try and keep things on schedule. Now, there are evening events tonight and tomorrow. There's a drinks reception tonight and a reception and a dinner tomorrow evening. Those are included in the price of your Zcon ticket. And I'm looking forward to relaxing later on this evening with all of you upstairs next to the pool. This year, we are using a new app, the Whova app, to help us make the conference a more interesting and fun experience for everybody. You can download it onto your mobile. It's also available on desktop. Keep an eye out for organizer announcements. If you have questions for the speakers, you can post them there, and then we will be picking those questions, giving them to the MC, and having them then asked of the speaker up here on the stage. If you have a specific technical level that you want to pitch yourself at, then you can filter sessions by the technical level, beginner, intermediate, advanced, or you can create your own agenda where you shortlist which sessions you want to attend and have that for you there in the Whova app. All sessions will be live streamed, so if you need to step out for whatever reason, you can watch them via the Whova app, and they will also be available via YouTube, as all the past Zcon sessions are. Why are we here? Well, I'm here because I believe that blockchain and cryptocurrency technology represents a fundamental change in the way that humans interact and do business. But more importantly than that, I believe that privacy is a really important element of that. And I don't want my son to grow up in a world where every single financial transaction that he undertakes can be surveilled, monitored, and tracked back to him, not just by relevant authorities, but by anybody in the world. So that's why I'm here. Everybody has their own reasons for being here. Some people are interested in helping people in repressive regimes be able to fund nonprofits or human rights organizations that would otherwise struggle to get funding. Other people may believe that Zcash and the Zk stack that it's built on represents the real future of DeFi, and they want to see it develop in that direction. For whatever reason we're here, I think it's important to remember that we're all striving to get to the same goal, which is to see Zcash in the hands of as many people as possible across the world, and to make sure that they all have access to private money that is decentralized and censorship resistant. Now, we all have our different views on how to get there. There are many different paths, there are many different routes, and this is an event that we at the Zcash Foundation organize in order to give the Zcash community an opportunity to come together, to share those ideas, to share those views, to discuss and debate the different paths that we can get to achieving that goal, and to help create an environment where the synthesis of those ideas and the sharing of that knowledge and the research and the updates that we're going to hear from various grant recipients and the core organizations in the Zcash ecosystem can serve to help build relationships across the ecosystem. Obviously, we can all meet online, we can meet on Zoom or on Google Meet, but there's no replacement for actually being here in person and being able to shake people's hands and speak to them face to face. That's why we organize this event. That's why we're here. That's why we've created this event for you all to come here. It's up to you what you do with it. You can sit here and you can listen and you can take some notes and then go away, or you can engage proactively. And you can share your ideas, you can listen to other people's ideas, you can discuss and debate them politely, as I specified earlier. But it really is up to you which direction Zcash goes and how successful Zcash is in the long term. The future has not been written. That's the theme of this year's Zcon. And what does that mean? Well, I once heard somebody say that the best way to predict the future, is to invent it. And I think that when it comes to creating the future of Zcash, it's up to us. We face a hostile environment in many respects. There are concerted efforts by various regimes and governments around the world to hamper or cripple cryptocurrency. A decentralized technology like this distills power away from those who are currently in power. It makes it more difficult for them to control the people that they want to keep under their thumb. And as a result, many governments and regimes are seeking to make it more difficult for crypto to thrive, spread, and be successful. But Zcash and other cryptocurrencies aren't going to simply be successful without somebody doing something about it. And whether you're here in the room today, whether you're watching online or watching this, watching a recording of this event later on, you are the people who will make a difference when it comes to the success or the failure of a project like Zcash. So never think that when you're sat here in the audience or you're sat at home watching this, that it's always up to the people who are here on stage to make that difference, to make Zcash a success or a failure. This year, we've deliberately made a massive effort to try and bring as many people from across the Zcash ecosystem up here onto the stage. So you're going to hear from grant recipients, you're going to hear from ambassadors from across the world, you're going to hear from researchers who are working on technology that is relevant to Zcash. But this is just a small percentage of the people who contribute to Zcash, the people who make up its ecosystem and its community. And you are one of those people. Even if you don't think you are, the fact that you're watching this means that you are one of those people. So if you are aligned with the goals of the Zcash project, if you believe that it is a fundamental human right for people to be able to transact with one another, to carry out financial transactions in privacy and without fear of being censored, then I put the question to you: what can you do to help make this project a success? What can you do to help make sure that the future that we are moving towards isn't one where we face an Orwellian style surveillance state where every single transaction, no matter what it is that we do, is surveilled and subject to censorship if the powers that be believe that it's something that we shouldn't be doing? Next up, we're going to hear a bunch of ecosystem updates from core organizations within the Zcash ecosystem, and then we'll be moving into our talks. But next up, I'd like to call on Zuko to give an update from the electric coin company.
That was a really great intro. Thanks, Jack. And thanks for organizing this. This is so exciting that we get another Zcon. Yay, Zcon, my favorite. So I do have slides, or I might have slides. Danica, do I have slides? All right, I'll go from memory. I'll look at my notes. So in 15, oh, okay, good. I really liked Jack's description of why he's here. Why the electric coin company does what we do is to empower everyone in the world with economic freedom. In support of that mission, we contribute to and support a fair and open currency to protect the freedom, dignity, consent, and security of people all over the world. And what we say is that our North Star is to deliver a world-class user experience for Zec. So this next 14 minutes is a summary of what we've done since Zcon4, and then where we're at and what we're doing now and how you can help. So since Zcon4, a big thing that happened was the so-called sandblasting. Some people say that it's a spam attack, but I don't like to say that because I don't know the intentions or exactly what the users are doing. But starting around Zcon4, there's been a really high load of shielded transactions getting added to the blockchain. And once that started happening, all the software fell over, which is what I expect. I have a rule that whenever something scales up by 10x, then everything breaks and you have to fix it, and that's what happened. So our team at Electric Coin Company, the first thing we did was upgrade Zcash D. Zcash D is the full node software that everything in the Zcash network relies on. So we made a whole bunch of optimizations and bug fixes for bugs or performance issues that were revealed by this new 10x or however much increased load. And the result of that is that the Zcash network was able to keep going. So all the centralized exchanges and miners and light wallet Ds and block explorers and businesses that integrate with Zcash and everything upgraded to the upgrades to Zcash D that we made, and we're able to continue processing the new heavier blockchain. And then something else we've done since Zcon4 is we specified and implemented and debugged and deployed the proportional fees, which was originally proposed by Audi from Nighthawk as a Zcash improvement proposal. But that took a lot of work. And we deployed that. It's optional, by the way, for like a backwards compatibility process so that it doesn't, the deployment of this new proportional fees doesn't break too many things along the way. But empirically, as soon as we did that, the high load reduced and changed. And that load having gone down has also helped more things start working again. So along the way, we got this security report from the security company named Halborn. They had found a bug that was in the old Bitcoin code base, and that Zcash D, as well as 200 or something other coins around the world, had cloned that code base and had the same bug. And so we have a good, like, pretty well-oiled practice at the Electric Coin Company of dropping everything and diagnosing exactly who might be vulnerable and exactly what the impact would be if this kind of security bug were exploited. It turned out that after we had done a lot of diagnosis and remediation, it turned out that nobody was in very much danger, probably. But it took quite a lot of work to make sure of that and to make sure that we deployed the fix so that if there was a danger, our users would be protected. And there was an eye-opening thing that I learned out of this, which is that those security consulting company, Halborn, that was organizing that, told us something like, Zcash is the only one out of those 200 coins who went ahead and fixed this rapidly. A lot of the other ones, yeah, I was really proud of our team. This is a pattern. There's always bugs in software, and it's really reassuring to me that we have a really high-quality team within ECC, and we also collaborated with Zcash Foundation engineers and Taylor Hornby, the independent security person. But yeah, so this thing always happens, like this kind of thing always happens. There's always bugs or potential bugs, and I always feel really relieved when I think, okay, my team is on it. Don't have to stay awake at night wondering what's going to happen. Yeah, so those Halborn people also said I remember we were like 90 days ahead. The other coins and the Halborn researchers themselves kept asking us to hold off and don't fix it too fast so that other people would have time to catch up. And we basically negotiated with them and told them, no, we're going to go ahead and fix it, and those other people will just have to deal. And then something else we've been doing that's another thing in the category of sort of invisible work that ECC has been doing is auditing the Rust dependencies. Computer security is one of those things where when it goes right, nobody notices and doesn't realize that you did anything. But there's a widespread issue in the whole world of computers nowadays called supply chain attacks or supply chain dependencies. And we've been doing something I'm really proud of and happy about, which is inspecting all of the different code bases that Zcash and other Zcash software depend on. And we've posted all our results. You can, I don't have a link here, but you can find on GitHub the results of that. Okay, it's already been like, what is this counting down? It says I have 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Is that right? All right, well, okay, for the next 15 slides real fast, here's a bunch of other stuff we did. We got Light Wallet running and so forth. And we've been working really hard on optimizing the software that several wallets and our own wallet and Zebra and some others depend on to make it more efficient. And that's almost ready. We've been doing that thing where we find one last bug and then we fix that, and then we find one last bug and then we fix that. But as far as I know, there's no more bugs. So this SDKs and libraries should be ready for everyone else to use like any day now. And we've made our own beta version of a wallet, which I'm really excited about because I get to be right in the feedback loop of all the user complaints. So if you want to be one of these users helping us find bugs, then come up to me and I'll give you access to the wallet. It's very rough, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts about it when you try to install it and everything. Okay, I got 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So what we're doing now, the main theme is decentralized Zcash and focus ECC. And the theme is, at ECC, we've been doing a lot of different things and kind of spreading ourselves too thin for many years. And it's going to be better both for Zcash as an ecosystem, as a community, and also for ECC if we refactor who does what. In particular, there's a bunch of things that it's going to be better for Zcash that everyone in the Zcash ecosystem doesn't depend solely on ECC, so it's not a single point of failure for these things. And that's a major theme that I want to talk to everyone about at this conference, is exactly what those things are and how you can help and what's the process of transitioning from everyone hitting up ECC for those things to hitting up some more decentralized structure for those things. And then that leaves only a few things so that ECC can do fewer things better and faster. Got to skip ahead. Here's the 4 things that we want to focus on. The 5th thing here is transitioning the other things so they don't drop on the floor. But the 4 things that we're prioritizing are making progress on proof of stake, making our own wallet so that we get live interactive learning from users as we go, the developer tools that I mentioned that other wallets and Zebra use, we're going to prioritize continuing to improve that, and the US-based policy work. All right, now it says I have 5 minutes and 28 seconds. Okay, fine. I'll just keep going till that counts down. So since Zcon4, Nate Wilcox, the chief researcher at ECC, has been studying proof of stake and how to transition from the current Zcash proof of work protocol to a proof of stake protocol. And the most recent thing is he just published a proposal or a pre-proposal called the trailing finality layer, which is a way to make hybrid proof of work, proof of stake as an intermediate step. It, at least partially, if not wholly, follows the Ethereum transition, which was successful so far. Previously, Nate, also came up with the concept of the Zcash Posterity Fund, which Shielded Labs adopted and renamed to the Zcash Sustainability Fund, which is related, but not the same thing as proof of stake, but it's complementary, I guess. All right, so our wallet, my main goal is just to have this live ongoing feedback loop so that we learn and improve from live users day and night. The first thing, so I've got a beta you can try right now. It's really rough, but come up to me. The first improvement that we intend to deploy shortly for Zashi, it's called Zashi. Like here, this is what it looks like. This is our new wallet. I'm really excited about it. The first thing that we are about to deploy for both the software tools that everyone else relies on, or that a lot of other people rely on, and for our wallet Zashi, is called Spend Before Sync. because as every Zcash user knows, syncing is a pain in the butt. And so we have been working really hard on speeding up syncing, but we also have an even better idea. Instead of fast syncing, make it so that you can actually use the wallet and receive and send money without waiting for syncing to complete. So then syncing just be like a background thought that you don't have to worry about. Yep, I already talked about that. So the fourth thing that we're doing up there on our list of 4 things is US policy work. We have sacrificed a whole bunch of international work on like connecting with exchanges in all different countries and the regulators and law enforcement and policymakers in all different countries. But we're doing so great at the US policy work that we're keeping going. You'll hear a lot about it on stage, but our regular podcast is totally the #1 most widely important podcast on the topic of crypto policy in general, not just privacy, not just Zcash or anything, but like everyone who cares about crypto and how the United States government manages and interacts with it watches this podcast. And we have these regular meetings in Washington, D.C. that Paul Brigner hosts, and you'll hear more about that. Oh yeah, so there's one more thing that I really wanted to tell you about, but our partner begged us not to breathe a word of it, so stay tuned, but there's another thing coming soon. Okay, so good, I have 1 minute and 54 seconds. The thing that I most want to get out of Zcon is connecting with people who are depending on ECC for software or support or other kinds of work, and that you want to know, are we going to keep doing that, or are we going to shift it to some more decentralized structure, and if so, what? Also, people who want to help with this decentralized structure. There's a lot of things outside of the 4 focus areas that I just listed. A great big one, there's at least 2 great big ones, but there's probably more, because what I keep experiencing is people saying, dang it, why isn't ECC doing better at X? And I'm like, oh yeah, X, okay, that's like the 20th thing on the list of things that people are depending on us for. So if you have needs, please come up to me and let's talk about that. And also, if you want to help with people's needs, let's talk about that. But the 2 big ones, I have 50 seconds. The 2 biggest buckets of things that ECC has historically done and that we need to decentralize, both for the resilience of Zcash and for the effectiveness of ECC. One is all the digital properties, the website, the Twitter, the Cypherpunk 0 NFT, and everything that comes with that. It's kind of daunting. Like, I think to myself, hey, websites, I've put up websites before myself. You run Nginx and you edit the HTML files or whatever. But in the modern day, there's a lot that goes into it. And we want to follow okay, I've got 15 seconds. We want to follow the model of the Ethereum Foundation, where the community submits content and maintains the content on the website. And the other big category is Zcashd. Everyone depends on Zcashd for everything, and that's a lot. So if you depend on Zcashd, or if you want to help, let's talk about that. Thank you for listening. Can't wait to talk to you at the conference.
And next up, we have Jonathan from Kedit. Kedit have been working on Zcash shielded assets, which will be the first significant functional update to the Zcash blockchain since it was launched. Take it away, Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. So thank you. Thank you for inviting us to this great conference. Historically, we've actually been invited to all the Zcash conferences and have been in touch with Zcash before Zcon4 even. So there's a strong tie between Kedit and Zcash running for now many years. I want to quickly give you updates on what we do, what we want to be doing, There are dedicated sessions during Zcon for diving in, so these are going to be headlines. But just maybe to give you a brief sense of who Kedit is, or what is Kedit, so that you can understand our connection to this ecosystem. This is the first time that we get to join the talks about the ecosystem as like a big part of what's happening in Zcash, and it's a lot of responsibility. We now are part of that decentralized effort to make Zcash thrive. And the main thing that at Kedit we connect and intersect with this community is the technological excellence. This is by far the biggest thing that has attracted us to this ecosystem. We, from the very first day, have witnessed all these efforts to make the algorithms, the tools, the science top-notch. And if I give a preview, you have done in ECC, Zuko, some more work than what you've described. You also supported the interaction with the ZSA work, so that we got to experience this top-notch quality of engineering, giving us feedback on what we're doing and iterating. So we're strongly connected to that aspect of, I'd say, authenticity in engineering. You don't put under the rug things that are really important. That piece about looking at the Rust dependencies, really for the rest of the world as well, is an example of that. So Kedit has been working much more in the enterprise space. We have an aspect that is working with government. We worked at DARPA. We were part of the World Economic Forum at some point, describing to them what can be used, how privacy can be used to advance freedom of people and their right. And in Israel, so the company is based in Tel Aviv. In Israel, we've been talking to regulators, the SEC. We did a sort of hackathon to explain to them how blockchain works. We have legs in many aspects of this blockchain ecosystem, but a lot of work with, let's say, institutions and not the traditional areas that the Zcash community is hanging out with. Nevertheless, over those years, we've accumulated experience in the particular, let's say, feature set that's required for asset transfer over Zcash. We've built tools. We've also explored other areas like private set intersection and other cryptographies outside of zero knowledge, but we kept coming back to moving assets on a blockchain with full privacy is important. And in Zcash, it was pretty obvious that moving only ZEC on the Zcash network can start to become limiting. There's a way to augment the usefulness of the Zcash ecosystem if you can issue other types of assets. So that was the start of the proposal of ZSA, Zcash Shielded Assets. And I'm really happy to say that after about a year and some later of work, we're now at the stage where we have the first concrete implementation of ZSA running. And the work that we've done in collaboration with the rest of the ecosystem has allowed us to complete the first chunk, which is have a kind of alpha version of ZSA, and you will have a deeper explanation of all these pieces by the team. Shout out to Pablo, who runs this team, and from Kedit, who is coordinating and building all of this with our team. One thing that's important to note is that when you're dealing with developing for an ecosystem that is still on the move, all those features that Zuko listed earlier, all these progress that has been made to the ecosystem, when we're developing ZSA, we now need to catch up to that because we branched off, did some work, but then the underlying libraries and even fee structure, things are moving. And so we ended up writing the zip and the implementations almost twice in order to achieve a level that's close to real time. And we also understood that in order to actually bring this to production, there's a whole chunk of work of integration with what's called NU6 that needs to happen. And so the next few weeks and months are going to be about bringing out the work that we've done to the community so that you can start seeing the interfaces and what it looks like to issue an asset, to move an asset around, to burn it, and kind of play with ZSAs. And we are doing the work to start bringing this into the mainnet Zcash at some point. So you're going to have, during this conference, both a dive on what we've achieved so far and a description of what it's going to look like to put it in mainnet. A big piece of the next, or let's say the next phases, is introducing asset swaps, because the usefulness of an asset is yet more augmented when you can swap the assets on a blockchain in one transaction. And there's a whole area of development that you will also hear that's coming up in the next few months. Something important, this is all financed by the Zcash community, the Zcash ecosystem, through those grants. And I've been asked to participate in panels describing our views. You can imagine that we are grants recipients. Our views are that this enables us to do this work. And I will probably have a very consistent responses to those questions when asked on panels. All of this is possible because Zcash holders are, in a sense, paying a tax to develop the next phases of Zcash. And there's a whole organization in place to try to figure out what is the most valuable development that can happen for the Zcash ecosystem. And we're very happy that we were able to join forces and be part of this ecosystem. One thing about what's coming up next, I think that if the ecosystem wants to grow and use those techniques, ZSA and others, we need to look a little bit more broader than just the US. And I think as a company from Tel Aviv, we have that role of trying to provide an outside view to the community. And I believe that this goes through an area that is not in the comfort zone of this community at all, which is exactly the compatibility with exchanges and the conversations about interactions with law enforcement and regulations that try to look at Zcash and understand how do you deal with a currency that's fully anonymous. I think that as a community, we have, first of all, we have the luck that this is not, the ZEC token is not one of those tokens on the SEC targets, because the mechanism by which ZEC was introduced is in the clear. So there's no, that battle at least is not really a battle. But if we want to be robust to regulators all around the world, we need to address the fact that regulated exchanges are looking at transactions from Zcash and saying, well, how do we deal with provenance, questions of identity, and these related questions. And so I believe that using ZSA, you can, have that conversation orthogonal to ZEC, to ZEC. You can have tokens where you decide that opt-in, these tokens are more compatible with what exchanges are expecting, have more features that help exchanges understand who is in front of them when that user wants to be identified. And I think that there's a space for these conversations to happen in the ecosystem so that the Zcash ecosystem as a whole becomes more robust. So increasingly, I will be, let's say, advocating for that part of conversation to happen in the space. I say it's uncomfortable because at the core, this is one of the only ecosystems that is a counterweight to all those oppressive things and intrusive things that we hear. And we have to keep this force. You don't want to introduce anything that obliterates this core strength that Zcash has, which is users have control over who sees what they're doing. This has to stay. And you don't want to slide into the even possibility of mass surveillance or anything like that. But at the same time, we do need to acknowledge that we want as a community to repel people that are using these techniques against, for nefarious purposes. And if there's a consensus on what are the extreme cases where you do want some interaction with, authorities, law enforcement, etc., what are the mechanisms that still keep our core values and our core, assurances, but make this robust to attacks from regulators and permit interactions with law enforcement. So all of this to say that I see ZSA as a place where we augment the usefulness of Zcash in general, and we permit the experiments that I believe can make this even more impactful in the broader, in all the world. I have 1.5 minutes left. Maybe again to thank the organizers of this event. It's last year in Vegas was really cool. This is already topping it, and I can't wait to see where this is going. And maybe one thing when you're hearing our talks about what we've achieved and the demos, don't hesitate to ask questions on how you can take the tools and use them, because now is the time for feedback on what we've built. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next up, we have Jason from the Zcash Community Grants Committee to tell us what they've been up to over the past year.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to give an overview about the program and then give you an update on what we've been up to. So my name is Jason McGee. I'm one of 5 members of the Zcash Community Grants Committee. Brian, Michael, and I have been committee members since January 2022. Amber joined in 23, and G-Guy started in July. So ZCG is a 5-person committee. We serve annual terms, and elections are staggered now. 3 seats are available in January, 2 in July. The committee is elected by the Zcash Community Advisory Panel, ZCAP. Virtually anyone can run to be a member. You can self-nominate, or you can be nominated by another community member. The only restriction is you have to go through the KYC process from the Zcash Foundation if you want to get paid. So the program was established in 2020 as the Major Grant Review Committee. It's gone through a couple name changes. It was ZOMG for a while, and then we decided Zcash Community Grant sounded better. ZCG receives the largest allocation of the Dev Fund, 40% of the block reward, which is 420,000 ZEC over the course of 4 years. ZCG is a committee under the foundation. It is not a separate organization. The foundation administers the program. They custody the funds and disperse them. But the decisions that we make as committee members are completely independent. We consider ourselves representatives of the community, and community input is one factor that we weigh when we make decisions on grants. A little bit about our meetings. So we meet on a weekly basis to discuss open grants and our various programs. Then we meet with the Zcash Foundation bi-weekly to vote on record. And then our meetings are, they're super detailed meeting minutes that are published to the forum where you can, understand the reasoning for each of our decisions. So our mission is to fund independent teams to perform ongoing development for the public good of the Zcash ecosystem. We fund projects that advance the usability, security, privacy, and adoption of Zcash. These projects can be technical or not technical, so long as they're designed to help Zcash succeed. So this is just a quick review of how we make decisions. After the applicant submits the grant, we give the community time to provide feedback. We use the Zcash community forum, and it can be a pretty rough place. There's a few trolls there with loud voices, but for the most part, we get good feedback from community members. From there, we deliberate and the merits of the proposal. We assess whether or not it's within the scope of something we want to fund. If it's technical, we might set up calls with ecosystem engineers. If we have questions for the applicant, we might set up a call with them. And then from there, we make a decision, and that decision is based off of majority vote. So how much have we spent? Since inception, the program has allocated $11.9 million. 94% of that has gone towards major grants. 3% has gone towards minor grants. And minor grants are things like conference sponsorships, the Zcash podcast, community resources like Alpha Day. And then we've also allocated a small percentage of funds to dedicated resources and our Global Ambassador Program, and I'll explain those a bit later in the presentation. So these are our top 5 grant recipients. Together, they have received almost 68% of the total funds that we've allocated. These are all long-term, ongoing projects. So Kedit's building Zcash shielded assets, as Jonathan mentioned. These will allow for things like private stablecoins and private Bitcoin to exist on top of Zcash, as well as other assets and NFTs. Zcash Media creates high-quality educational videos about Zcash. They've released 2 documentaries so far, which were well-received, and that was last year. And then this year, they're working to release 10 more, and they'll start distributing those in the fall. Tor is working on a project called Arty, and it's a rewrite of the Tor protocol in Rust, and it can be used to bring network-level privacy to Zcash. For Nighthawk, about 60% of the grants have gone to mobile wallet development, and then the other half was split between the Thor chain integration and then half going to infrastructure for Light Wallet D and Zcash Block Explorer. Equilibrium Group, they've received a series of grants for Cigarette, which is a network test suite for Zcash D and Zebra D nodes. So what types of projects have we funded? So this slide shows how we've allocated funds by category or type. 25% have gone to protocol or specifically Zcash shielded assets. Wallets are the second biggest category. They include all 4 of the major mobile wallets, which are Nighthawk, Y-Wallet, Zec Wallet, Zingo. Infrastructure includes things like Cigarette, the Zcash Uni FFI library, the Avalanche subnet bridge, non-wallet Zec pages, Zigo, and then integrations and BTC Pay server. Yeah, so community is our global ambassador program, Zec Hub, Zcash Brazil, and then dedicated resources. I think that the allocation seems pretty reasonable. Basically we get grants in randomly and then have to decide. So it's not like we seek out to fill these allocations. So we're going to start including this data in our dashboard. And it'll be posted along with our meeting minutes to the forum. It's a great way to see how we're allocating funding on an ongoing basis. So we wanted to go through and highlight some of our favorite grants and grantees from the past year that haven't already been mentioned. Han is a community favorite. His Y wallet has been very dependable despite performance issues other wallets have experienced. It was our first ever retroactive grant, and what that means is he built the project, he built the wallet before, applying for the grant. Han also just finished up a project that allows users to store shielded Zec on a Ledger device. We're just waiting on Ledger to accept the app. Next up, Zec Hub. This started as Ian Sagstetter's side project while he was working at ECC. It originally consisted of a podcast and informational resources, and it's developed into a decentralized platform where contributors can collaborate to create educational content. The content they create is very impressive. If you have the opportunity, check out the video comparing on-chain privacy technologies. It's awesome. There's more than a dozen active contributors, and they offer bounties so anyone can get involved and get paid to participate. All governance decisions are made by a 10-person DAO. So Free2Z is Zcash's social media platform. It's super popular, especially in the Spanish community in Venezuela. It started out as a peer-to-peer fundraising platform, and I've seen people raise money to get a new bike or a computer. One person was able to get enough money to purchase cancer treatment medication for his mother. People now use it. The functionality has expanded, so people now use it for blog posts, live streams. One guy's offering guitar lessons. And the live streaming is pretty popular. I think the Zcash Foundation's AV Club does their meetings on there. So if you haven't had the opportunity to check it out, definitely do so. Next, Zingo. So Zec Wallet was one of the early ZOMG grants, and it was the first mobile wallet to support shielded sapling transactions. After Aditya stopped supporting Zec Wallet, Zonkus stepped up, he forked it, he created Zingo, and then he added support for unified addresses in the Orchard pool. The app has some really cool features like the sync and rescan report. But Zonkus is all about authentic financial insights. So he wants the app to be more than just a wallet, but a tool that helps people better understand and manage their finances. So, we look forward to seeing how this project progresses. Dedicated resources. So we have community resources, and then we have ZCG resources. So these are resources that we bring on people as independent contractors for full or part-time roles. For example, ZK Squirrel, he's our community note taker. He attends the biweekly Arborist calls, summarize the key takeaways, and then posts them to GitHub. They're super convenient. Taylor serves as the ecosystem security lead. He's audited a number of the projects that we funded, including Y Wallet, Zgo, Light Wallet D, and a few others. He's found some high severity critical bugs, and some of these, they're either high severity or critical, and some can compromise privacy or put funds at risk. So this has been a great service to provide because otherwise, developers would have to fund independent audits on their own. Ying Tong came in as the Halo 2 community manager, and we just brought Paku on as the community wallet developer starting August 1st. He's going to work with Nighthawk and also Zingo, and among other things. So, one sec. So next up is our Global Ambassador Program. So Ambassadors lead activities that, basically there's two things that we wanted the ambassadors to do. Basically help drive user adoption and build new Zcash communities all over the world. We have ambassadors in 14 different countries on 5 continents, including places like India, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and just one sec. And so the primary activities that they do are like meetups, wallet onboarding events, content creation, translation. They receive a $1,000 stipend to support and reward their efforts. And some of the communities have actually become very vibrant. Like the community in Latin America is very large. The Spanish-speaking community is super active. They have their own website, podcasts, blog articles, education programs. And additionally, Zcash Brazil spun off from the program. They submitted their own grant proposal, and now they're just doing an awesome job representing Zcash in Brazil at all sorts of different events. So here's a couple photos. The photo on the left is from Madison, who's our San Diego ambassador, like in the US. She works at Edge. So she hosted a Zcash-focused pottery class where they discussed Zcash, made mugs, spoons, plates. I went to one of her meetups in San Diego with the Zcash media team. We watched a couple videos, had a great discussion afterwards, and it was a lot of fun. The second picture is from our Nigerian ambassador, Chidi. He does a lot of physical meetups and education events to teach people about Zcash. He also sponsored a local soccer team and got them Zcash jerseys. So what has ZCG accomplished? We've brought in a number of teams from different parts of the world to work on long-term ongoing projects. We've also helped build vibrant communities in places like Brazil, South Korea, and Venezuela. And we believe that these contributors make Zcash more decentralized and resilient. We're also the only organization that is constantly reallocating block rewards to other areas of the ecosystem. And that allows us to not only fund interesting projects, but also fill gaps that emerge from unexpected events like the ECC restructuring that happened earlier this year. We were able to bring on Beth to continue to focus on partnerships and Paku to help with wall development. We're also the most, like hands down, the most transparent organization in the Zcash ecosystem. Like the entire grant process plays out live on the forum. All of our key decisions and reasoning are memorialized in our minutes. Again, you have to check them out, they're super detailed. But there's also a built-in accountability mechanism where if you don't like us or the decisions we make, you can vote us off the committee. And you obviously can't do that with other organizations. So this is a statement that we wrote on the Dev Fund 2024, or 2.0. So currently the community is discussing whether to continue the Dev Fund after the next halving. And we believe that ZCG plays an important role in the ecosystem. And if it's continued, then we think that the committee believes that the ZCG program should continue to receive the largest allocation so we can continue to fill our mission and help decentralize Zcash. Wow, that's like perfect timing. Yeah, so I guess I do want to say a thank you to the Zcash Foundation for all the support they provide. Jack, Alex, Danica, Deidre, Dan, you guys are awesome, so thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And next up, you have me again, giving an update on the Zcash Foundation. Big news from the past year is that we have done a stable release of Zebra. So Zcash now has a second Zcash node implementation. Great. I did think that the little ta-da icon was just a little bit subtle, so I thought Party Zebra was more appropriate. For those of you who aren't aware, Zcash was originally built on top of the Bitcoin code base, and that code base has now been around for 15 years. It's written in C++. It's beginning to show, well, I think it's been showing its age for quite some time, and it's been described by one of the ECC engineers as a C++ hellscape. So Zebra is the mechanism by which we're going to escape that hellscape. It's written in a modern programming language called Rust, which is more memory safe than C++. It's got a modular architecture, and it's basically going to provide the foundation for building, developing, growing, and improving Zcash over the next 15 years. And who knows what technology will look like by then. But for now, it's out there. It's been audited. There were no major issues found, which is a massive kudos to the Zcash Foundation engineers for successfully building something that complex without any major issues. And it addresses a subset of the use cases that Zcash does. You can use it to obviously help maintain the Zcash network, to validate the blockchain, it gossips and spreads unconfirmed transactions and blocks. You can use it as a backend for light wallet. So if you are one of the wallet teams that is running a light wallet infrastructure, you can use it instead of Zcash to backend your light wallet. Or if you are the sort of person who wants to run your own light wallet, then you can also use it. And finally, if you're a miner, you can use it to generate block templates for mining. Now, as I said, Zcash is modular. Like I said, I think of it as a foundation for building forward into the future, and this is the functionality that currently exists. The big question is, what should we do next? And there's various ideas about what other functionality we should build in. And if you have strong feelings about any of these, I think there's a poll rolling in the Hoover app right now. And also feel free to grab us and let us know what you think, what functionality you think we should add to Zebra next. And it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge the massive contribution that the ECC engineers made to the development of Zebra. First of all, Zebra relies heavily on various Rust libraries that have been developed by ECC, and also they were a huge help in terms of understanding some of the undocumented functionality that exists within Zcash that was inherited from Bitcoin. So I want to thank Strad and all of the ECC engineers for their help in contributing to that project. The other massive project that we've been working on is Frost. Frost is a threshold signature scheme that addresses the problem that you can't use multisig with shielded ZEC. Multisig is a mechanism whereby you can require that multiple people are required to authorize a spend of transactions. It's used a lot by exchanges, by custodians to make sure that funds are held securely, but unfortunately, it's not possible with shielded ZEC. So Chelsea, along with Ian Goldberg at the University of Waterloo, came up with the flexible round optimized Schnorr threshold signatures, continuing a long tradition of cryptographers finding innovative ways to create acronyms out of the names of their papers. So this is not just useful for Zcash; it is of far broader application in the realm of privacy, and as such, it is currently being evaluated by the Internet Research Task Force for adoption as an informational RFC. But we have created a Rust implementation of Frost, and that's currently undergoing audit. No major issues so far. And the next step really is to start then implementing it for Zcash. So a zip has been drafted. The security proof of the Frost for the re-randomized technology that Zcash uses is currently underway. And if you want to learn more about that, you can join the wallet stream on the final day of Zcon4, and you'll be able to hear more there from some of the team who are working on that. I think as we move forward, the ability to do multi-sig style threshold signatures will become increasingly important. It's something that's really necessary, as I said, for exchanges and custodians to be able to secure their funds. And also it'll be very useful when we start getting into doing cross-chain interoperability. Next up, the third big pillar of what we do at the foundation is community and ecosystem support. So obviously we organize Zcon, and at this point I just want to really acknowledge the amount of work and effort, blood, sweat and tears that has gone into this event by some of the team, particularly Danica, who's sitting right back there. Not sure how much sleep she's had recently, but it takes an awful lot of effort to put this event on, and I just want to give Danica, Alex, and the rest of the team, Dee, Dan, John, the whole team it really is a team effort. I hold absolutely no credit for this event. It is entirely our ops team, so I just want to give them a big round of applause. And if they weren't gluttons for punishment enough, they decided to do it twice this year. So this year saw the first of our Zcon Voices events. As Jason mentioned, the Zcash Brazil community is vibrant and very, very successful. So we partnered up with them to deliver Zcon Voices, which is our first regional event, and we hope that funding permitting, we'll be able to do more of those going forward. And this is a situation where, unlike this Zcon, where we take the lead on organizing it, arranging the agenda, etc. This is a situation where we partnered with the Zcash Brazil community. They found the venue, they organized the speakers, the schedule, the content, and we merely provided the sort of operational support and financial support that was necessary to make it possible. As was alluded to by Jason, we support the operations of the Zcash Community Grants Committee. I think that there, again, our ops team are really instrumental in making sure that things run smoothly there. We also have recently launched our own minor grants program, and it's worth bearing in mind that the Zcash Foundation was originally set up as a grants giving organization. And it issued grants to organizations like Zcon4, to the Nighthawk team. When the major grants, what's now called the Zcash Community Grants program started, that kind of distracted us away from our original mission of giving grants. So this is kind of really returning to that original mission, but doing so in a different way. With major grants, there's a certain sort of expectation of thresholds that you should reach. You're expected to be a team with a reasonable prospect of surviving the departure of any one member of that team. With minor grants, we're far more. It's intended to be a lower threshold, smaller projects, including quite happy to evaluate applications by individual applicants. And the idea is that we then provide the beginnings of a path where you can get involved in the Zcash ecosystem, apply for a minor grant. If you're successful, you can then potentially apply for a major grant. And then the ultimate goal of all of this is to allow people to then, at some point in the future, apply for a slice of this or a future dev fund. But so that first minor grants program went really well. We tried an experiment where we polled the Zcash Community Advisory Panel to decide which grant applications should be approved. I think that went really, really well. So we're going to be running another minor grants program straight after Zcon, as soon as we've recovered and caught up on our sleep. And if you're interested in doing some paid work or contribution to the Zcash ecosystem, I would strongly advise that you keep an eye out for when those applications open. We've also been issuing what I call research grants, looking at programmability and privacy-preserving proof of stake. So a couple of years ago, we polled Zcap on what they believed the priorities should be for the Zcash ecosystem. And two of the top things were moving away from proof of work, and proof of stake is the obvious destination for that, and adding programmability to Zcash. Obviously, the top priority that they identified was adding ZSAs, and that as you heard from Jonathan, that work is well underway. We also, over the past year, spun up, thanks to Ryan Taylor, the Zcash Foundation AV Club. So this is a grouping of people who meet regularly and who deal with all things AV related. And they are going to be very active here at Zcon. And we'll expect that you'll be able to see a lot of the content that they're creating coming out over the next few weeks and months. And finally, we protect the Zcash trademark. This is sometimes a controversial question. People say, why do we need a trademark? Well, the simple fact is that people want to abuse the Zcash name to defraud others. So there are scams like Zcash Global, which has defrauded people out of many tens of thousands of pounds. They were based in the UK. We managed to get that successfully taken down. And we're just currently awaiting for the transfer of the zlend.cash domain to us, which we've successfully applied to have seized. And this, again, is another example of a website where people abuse the Zcash name. They're looking to defraud people out of money. And that's one of the main reasons that we want to make sure that we have strong trademark protections for the Zcash trademark. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about geographic decentralization. It's been a topic of conversation within the community over the past couple of years that the Zcash ecosystem is heavily concentrated in the United States. Both ECC and the Zcash Foundation are US domiciled organizations. And it's worth saying that the US is a good environment in many respects. The 501c3 structure, the nonprofit structure that that the Zcash Foundation and the Bootstrap organization, the parent of ECC, is a very good structure. Provides really strong protections. It's tax efficient. You'll end up paying large amounts of money to the government in tax, and it provides very strong transparency. And also, one of the great advantages about the United States is that the First Amendment protects the right to write software, and that was a key factor in the privacy side's victory in the original crypto war back in the 1990s. However, there are regulatory headwinds. There does seem to be a faction within the powers that be in the United States who don't want to see crypto succeed, and that creates a fair amount of uncertainty, and we perceive that as risk. So I'm pleased to be able to say that we have begun the process of setting up a nonprofit entity in the Cayman Islands. It may even be fully complete by the time this conference is over. We're just waiting for the final bits of paperwork to be done. And the plan is that this new entity will become an operating entity. We will transfer some of the activities that the Zcash Foundation currently undertakes, likely more internationally focused activities, to that new entity and get it up and running and functioning. And the goal is to ensure that if the United States becomes a hostile environment for either crypto or privacy-preserving crypto specifically, our goal is to ensure that we don't end up suffering any significant negative consequences to Zcash as a result of that. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important that we ensure that Zcash is indestructible. In a technical sense, it is, because anybody can run a node, but as has been highlighted, the dev fund going to a small number of US-based organizations does represent a risk. So this is what we believed was the best solution to that. So I have 20 seconds left. I just want to finish off by saying that the theme of this year's conference is the future has not yet been written. So let's write it together as a unified community with a shared vision for Zcash. And with that, we're going to take a little bit of a break. And next up, we'll be hearing from Daniel Benerock and Ying Tong about the research they've been doing into programmability for Zcash. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we're already 4 minutes late due to me being distracted, so let's try and get it back on schedule. Next up, we have Daniel Benarok and Yingtong Lai, am I pronouncing that right? Who are going to talk about some work they've been doing, systemizing knowledge around the prospects for adding programmability to Zcash. So please take your seats. I'll go outside in a moment and shout out everybody to come in. And give it up for Yingtong and Daniel.
This is the clicker? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right. So thank you all for being here. And thank you to the Zcash Foundation for inviting us to share this work with you all. So as Jack said, we're going to be talking a little bit about this work on surveying programmability protocols that can hold some kind of privacy in the functionality and whatnot. And we're surveying the protocols that are out there, both like in academia and sort of that are being built and deployed potentially in different ecosystems in, I guess, the blockchain space. This is work that the both of us are doing with Brian Gillespie, who's also at Inversed. And this work has actually been commissioned by the Zcash Foundation and not by the major grants committee. So this is kind of one of those minor grants. But we're very excited to be able to contribute to the Zcash ecosystem in this way, because we do feel like one of the key components for the success of Zcash is sort of how do we add functionality and how do we enable not only users to use applications on Zcash, but also developers to build on Zcash, right? So we're going to talk more about that in a second. And so really, like, it was around January that we were in discussions with the Zcash Foundation, and we submitted our kind of proposal. At the end of the day, the motivation is clear, and we were on board from the get-go. The goal is to survey the existing protocols out there, but with the kind of a focus on how could it work on Zcash, right? Like, this is a core component of what elected, sort of all the different protocols. We started thinking about how the definitions are going to come together, what are the different parameters, and et cetera, and the applications that we're going to be talking about. And we're going to talk a bit more in detail about all these parts.
So if you're coming here from the DeFi world, you may have heard the term programmable privacy very recently in the context of flashbots and MEV, so maximally extractable value. This is pretty much one of the most exciting and important problems in decentralized finance. And so the Flashbots team has come up with a way to allow users to conditionally reveal their transactions, basically conditioned on some share of the profit that validators could extract from backgrounding or otherwise arbitraging their transactions. So in this very new context, programmable privacy refers to the ability to arbitrarily specify the conditions on which you reveal or not reveal some confidential information. And I think what's interesting to note here is this sort of privacy is very instantaneous. So in this context, they are referring to pre-trade privacy, whereby, yeah, you don't want to reveal the information before you're guaranteed some share of the profit. However, you do want to execute the trade eventually. And so in this context, you want to reveal the information, and quite soon, in fact, before the block epoch is up. And there's been discourse recently as well about the usefulness of pre-trade privacy in isolation, or in other words, does revealing this trade after execution negate any of the benefits gained from concealing it before? So really, it's an active and very exciting area of research. There's lots of money at stake, and the people at Flashbots are realizing how strategic privacy can help to protect users and can help users to retain more value in the protocol. And for the rest of us who have been working in privacy-centric projects such as Zcash or Secret Network, we have a slightly different understanding of this same phrase, programmable privacy. Here, we never want to reveal the information. So it's not instantaneous privacy, it's privacy forever. But we are interested in the scope or the range of computation that we can perform on this concealed information. So for instance, Secret Network, they have a network of trusted execution environment nodes that users encrypt to, and that are responsible for performing arbitrary computations on this encrypted data. And furthermore, we may be interested in verifying arbitrary features of this concealed data. So programmability here does not come in when revealing the data. We never reveal it. Rather, it comes in when making computations or making statements about this concealed data.
So really, when we talk about programmable privacy, we're really talking about that kind of layer of like application design, right? Like when we think about zero knowledge and being able to program circuits and program applications, we are always like considering the whole stack from, is our proving system generic enough to hold sort of any kind of statement in the circuit? Do we have kind of a language like a ZKVM or some type of API that allows us to write circuits in a generic way? And then we're talking about this idea of, do we have a protocol that can allow for others, essentially other developers, to build some kind of application on this protocol, right? So in this case, Zcash is not programmable, but there is like specific functionality in application for using applications. That's one of the things that Kedit is doing. This is also an example like for Tornado Cash, for example, where the application is really to just have kind of a mixer, a private transfer application on Ethereum. But it's also like Nocturne, where essentially it acts as a kind of proxy party to allow users to interact privately with other smart contracts, right? And then we have a kind of protocols. So the idea that the protocols that I was mentioning have this application privacy. Basically, they can offer, the specific projects can offer and need to have this kind of responsibility to make sure that there is sort of anonymity sets in the applications, but also like to be able to potentially build kind of a larger anonymity set of some sort. So this is an example from Namada that this is one of their goals, right? To build kind of a anonymity set for assets on Ethereum and across actually other chains. Another kind of thing that can be done or given in the support of these protocols is enabling unlinkability of actions on chain, like Zcash and Zerocash kind of build this idea of unlinkability by doing kind of commit and nullify and whatnot. And for example, the Aztec protocol or Aztec 3 has been now thinking about how to expand that to larger kind of sets of computations. Zexi does that as well in some way. Another one is really to providing economic security guarantees, right? So all these assets are now dependent on the kind of protocol and the cryptography. So not only for the privacy, but also for the security. We have that we want to encourage users to have like a privacy preserving design, and sort of this comes down to kind of the way that the protocol is also being designed specifically. If you give too much freedom, then there's a risk to have like less security or less privacy at the level of application. There is some protocols that do private and public, others that only do private, etc. And with that comes also the responsibility to kind of give an API that is ensuring some type of security, right? Like if you allow for like too much modularity, then it can break down differently. Yeah.
So hopefully that contextualizes and motivates this SOK. How we're going to proceed now is, first of all, we're going to introduce a high-level mental model, which we use to think about a range of protocols and applications covered in this SOK, which we'll enumerate. And then afterwards, we'll move on to really a Zcash specific part, our proposals for adjustments that we can make to the Zcash protocol to integrate these. And lastly, future work that we have planned. So yeah, first of all, the high-level framework. We conceptualize the protocol as consisting of two components. Firstly, a state that we can read and write. And secondly, a set of validity predicates that encumber or restrict how participants in the protocol read or write, or which subset of participants can read and which subset can write. So to make this more concrete, Public state is defined as parts of the state that anyone can read, so there's no need to fulfill any validity predicate. Whereas private state is parts of the state that are actually restricted access. So you can think of this as a viewing key on Zcash, for example. Only those in possession of it can read or decrypt a certain note. And in practice, the point of an application and the point of having validity predicates is to encumber the rights, and it's to define what is a valid state transition or not. But what might be interesting to note is that when it comes to private state, reads and writes need not be encumbered by exactly the same predicates. For example, in Zcash, the viewing key versus spending key. And for example, in Penumbra, which we'll see later, writes are actually doable on-chain, even without the ability to read. So this framework is going to inform our classification of applications and protocols to follow. And mainly, we'll be looking at two types of private rights. We found this to be the most interesting sort of split between these applications and protocols. So some of them do the private rights on-chain, and most of them do them off-chain. So the most familiar class of applications would probably be those that do rights, private rights off-chain. And in these applications, in many cases, private state is owned by a single user. So Zcash is an example of such an application where one user owns a note and is able off-chain to authorize the spending of said note, and reveals on-chain only some commitment to the note. And there is no mutation of this private state on-chain. Rather, there is just a verification of certain features of this private state. So really, with this primitive, we can instantiate this primitive, this class of applications using just one primitive, which is zero-knowledge proofs. And we've been able to do a lot with this one primitive and with this one class of applications. So for example, I'll just fast forward here, but basically we have applications that provide functional privacy. For example, if you have a proprietary machine learning model that you want to prove is optimal on certain sets of inputs and outputs, you can provide the weights of your model as private input to some circuit, zero-knowledge circuit, for example. And you can do this because you, the user, know the entire private state, which is the weights of the model. So, and this, in the same spirit, if you have some kind of exploit that violates some invariant, you can prove the effectiveness of this exploit without having to reveal it. Same story with a bespoke trading strategy, attested sensors. Oh, yeah, I don't know what that one's about. Sorry, I made these slides, but I forgot what exactly that's about. The other large class of private application, off-chain private state applications focus more on data privacy. So in one primitive that appears everywhere is anonymity sets. And this is what offers confidentiality in Zcash, in mixers such as Tornado Cash. And it's what offers anonymity in identity systems. And this has been used to build anonymous reputation systems, which can just be layered on top as additional functionality. Anti-collusion voting as well is instantiable with just anonymity sets. And the last kind of data privacy really makes use of well-known public programs. So for example, like the DKIM signature and email protocols. Some people built the ZK email verifying this. So the point is to conceal some parts of your email, but to reveal that you have like an email address from MIT or some reputable organization. And the same thing with standards like JSON, JWT, the TLS handshake. People have built circuits that are kind of web to oracles that encode the very well-known rules of these public protocols, but obfuscate private inputs. Yeah, and you could do the same with, for example, private inputs to a well-known public machine learning model. And you can use this for secret information games, as well as an interesting use case is proving that you encrypted something correctly. And this actually is necessary in some systems that we'll see later on that make use of FHE and that deal with ciphertext, but still need some proof of correct encryption of these ciphertext. So yeah, this is just like an incomplete taxonomy of the range of things we can do with just zero knowledge proofs, with just a single user knowing all the state and mutating it off-chain. And Zcash is one of these applications. Most interesting applications of zero knowledge proofs fall into this category. So for protocols to support these applications and to enhance their privacy, they need to basically compose anonymity sets across these applications. So for example, in the Zaxi protocol, each application produces some state commitment that is indistinguishable from those of other applications. And therefore, by participating in the Zaxi protocol, you're benefiting from the anonymity sets of state updates produced by all other applications in the same protocol. I will note that I think Alio, the project, removed this functional privacy from their implementation, but the original Zaxi paper did have it and did allow composition of anonymity sets across applications. So, and as Daniel mentioned just now, Nocturne is an instantiation of this system on Ethereum. So Nocturne allows users to interact with arbitrary third-party smart contracts, such as Uniswap, from a single shielded pool. So basically, all interactions on-chain look like they're coming from the same shielded pool. And so it's a really elegant design because they don't conceal the actual actions that the users are taking, rather they just conceal the identity of the user. And this is sufficient, or this is the best we can do in many trading use cases, whereby we can, in fact, reverse engineer private trades just from looking at public price changes. So in those cases, there is no point trying to conceal the actual trade amounts. And the best we can do is to conceal the identity of the trader and prevent someone from inferring some kind of strategy or belief that is specific to one identifiable user. So the next class of off-chain private state applications actually support multi-user private state. And this is not ontologically different from the first class because, yeah, these modifications are not on the protocol layer, they're on the application layer. So basically, you can do, for example, some kind of MPC protocol to collaboratively form a transaction before submitting that transaction on-chain. So Flashbots did this experiment whereby they had a user submit some confidential transaction, and they had a searcher submit a confidential search algorithm, and they jointly computed a back-running transaction using an MPC protocol. And the idea here is that if they are successful in producing a profitable back-running transaction, then this transaction can be posted on-chain. And if not, then neither of them reveals their private inputs in the first place. So this is, so again, this transaction was formed using MPC, but to the protocol, it makes no difference how you form the transaction. So really this difference is on an application level. And besides MPC, another way we can achieve this is using collaborative ZK snarks. Actually, this is also just MPC. So this is when the parties in the MPC collaborate to compute a ZK proof, right? So the program that they're computing is the prover in your proof system. And the point here is that each party owns a different part of the witness, and working together, they can compute a proof attesting to the fact that this witness is satisfying. So the way protocols can support applications with multi-user private state is, I think Anoma is a good example of this. So I guess just focus on the leftmost part of the diagram. And this is when you see the idea of intent or partial transactions being sort of first-class citizens in the Anoma protocol. So they're all about defining some language to express general intents. And the point of these intents is that can be submitted to these parties called solvers who run some kind of optimal algorithm to match partial transactions and produce fully formed transactions. And often these partial transactions are atomic in nature, meaning either both parties are happy or like neither is happy, like nothing happens, I mean. And Aztec is another example of supporting off-chain private state.
Yeah, in Aztec, the point in a way is that they aimed for kind of very general programmability in the same style than like Zerocash introduced with commitments and nullifiers. In that way, what they enable is being able to have like a generic kind of note that includes information about any type of application. And then every time there is a read from that note, there needs to be a nullification in order to preserve the unlinkability. Now they have these sort of private functions and public functions. Now the private functions are associated each with sort of a specific circuit. And the way that this is verified on chain is that every proof is then verified at the consensus level. So it's still kind of off-chain computation. And there is like this kind of distinction between private and public functions in that first you want to do the private ones because you can access kind of historic reads. So just like in Zcash, you can span the note using a root of a commitment tree that is like older than the latest state. So similar to that happens also in Aztec. But when you go into, and then of course the private functions can generate public state and whatnot, but then the public state always needs to be done based on the latest state of the chain. And this enables sort of full programmability from like a smart contract perspective.
So the next class of applications actually moves the computation of private state on chain. So I'm like by these two diagrams, I'm trying to illustrate the shift in that vertical bar, whereby in the off-chain case, this combination of private state is done off-chain, whereas in this new class of applications, it's done on-chain. So let's make it concrete with an example, Penumbra, for instance. It allows users to submit individual swaps that are in and of themselves not complete transactions. So what these users do, their private state is the swap. What they do is they encrypt it to some threshold of validators in the penumbra network. Okay, and then what the protocol does on-chain is homomorphically sum up these encrypted swaps. And then threshold decrypt the aggregate swap. And it is this aggregate swap that is executed against some global liquidity pool. So the point here is that each individual swap is sort of concealed inside this batch. And yeah, what's different about ANOMA is that this sort of computation on private state is done on-chain. It's done blindly on a ciphertext. And yeah, by saying it's done on-chain, I mean that every consensus node in the network can do it, as opposed to previously when we were, I don't know, backrunning things or when we were solving intents. All that was done off-chain by individual entities working together. So
one good example maybe is the kind of blinding signature on Zcash, right? Like there is still some kind of like on-chain action of adding some ciphertext or some like commitments, homomorphic commitments, but we still call that off-chain because actually kind of the result of the execution is already known off-chain versus in Penumbra where like the aggregation of these swaps actually gives a concrete result that wasn't known previously.
Yeah, exactly. So each user actually needs the help of the protocol actors to combine their traits with those of other users to produce the final batch swap that will be executed. So I hope this difference is clear. To me, this was one of the most interesting differences. And so using this primitive of like threshold, like additively homomorphic threshold encryption, I think they call this flow encryption. So using this primitive, Penumbra can implement batch swaps, voting in proof of stake, I think, and delegation in proof of stake. So anything that you can just add up and batch. So there's this project called Zama. They work on FHE, and you can think of it as just a generalization of Penumbra. So instead of additively homomorphic encryption, Zama allows us to do fully homomorphic encryption. Once again, it's to a threshold of validators, Zama validators. Yeah, but the idea is the same as Penumbra. And another instantiation of this is a very recent Suave chain. So again, this is from the Flashbots project. And the idea is, so if you saw previously this backrunning solving activity, it was previously happening off-chain. So the idea with Suave chain is they want to move these searchers and solvers on-chain. And how they do that is they encourage searchers and solvers to publish their strategies as smart contracts. And these smart contracts are deployed to what's called the MEVM. So it's like an EVM, but with precompiles that make searchers is efficient. And these are deployed to, I think, okay, their initial rollout is just deployed to like some centralized node, but eventually they want to deploy it to a TEE. And so this TEE holds all these private search strategies, and users can now encrypt their transactions and their bits to this same TEE, which will then use this information to form full transactions and full blocks. So the output of Suave chain is actually blocks that will then be submitted to the Ethereum chain. Yeah, but I consider this on-chain because the Suave protocol is responsible as a whole for running, for mutating private state. And secret network sort of generalizes this to not just searchers and solvers, but to any smart contract. But the idea is the same as swap chain. So secret network has a network of TEEs. So each of the nodes in secret network is a TEE.
Thank you. So we just went over sort of all these applications that we've been exploring, the protocols. You saw that we didn't leave aside kind of any specific technology, like we included homomorphic encryption, we are considering TEs as trusted executed environments, and of course zero knowledge, right? Because we understand that the path of the future for programmability is not purely in zero knowledge, because that could potentially constrict also the type of computations. So we're going to explore a few of the ways that we believe that Zcash could include programmability. Now, there are many ways, so if we don't cover all the details right now, I mean, this is fine. We still haven't formed like a very deep opinion or strong opinion ourselves, so we're still working on this. But the first sort of direction that has been thought of before as well is the Zexy style, right? Like if we could generalize the type of nodes inside of the Zcash protocol to include more than just the asset value, the asset owner, and of course the details specific to security, this could allow for Zexy, where basically there is kind of a payload, like you could think about it as a fixed memo that needs to include some kind of like proof of validation of some external application, right? That's why this is still like on the off-chain kind of realm. And we started with Zexy actually because, so the order here is kind of in order of invasiveness in a way, like how much do we need to change the protocol? You may have differing opinions. We're definitely open to discuss this more in detail at the conference and otherwise. But the good thing about Zexy is that the kind of type of protocol would be preserved, right? It's still like a commitment, and there's nullification, and transactions could look similar to what it is today, which also includes like the impact to the users, right? Like we also need to be wary of how much the protocol changes and the usability of Zcash, because as Zuko mentioned here, like it's not only about the protocol. There is UX, there is applications, there is miners, etc. Then we have the idea of TEs, right? So in this case, I don't know if I can, oh, this is cool. So if we consider these blocks like the Zcash network as like the blockchain, adding TEs would be quote unquote relatively simple. And of course, I don't want to ever say simple in reality when it comes to cryptography, but it basically would mean sort of sending some kind of off-chain data that basically would still have to be included in the network itself, in the protocol, as like specific to TE. But then like all of the computation of the applications would be done inside of this hardware environment. And then some kind of signature is being sent back that needs to be verified at the consensus level. So these two changes are seemingly like, or relatively, I don't want to be simple. So
yeah, and thank you to Andrew Miller. I just stole this diagram from his slides. He's been talking about this tea kettles. Basically, they are this overlay network of TEEs, but they do derive some security from the layer 1 Zcash in the sense that messages encrypted to these TEEs are publicly committed to in layer 1 Zcash, and that's how we force inclusion into this overlay network. So yeah, I agree that this is a relatively light change, because I mean it's just about interpreting the public messages on Zcash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, and so this is another idea that I stole from the ANOMA team for a privacy-preserving bridge. Well, the idea here is to not introduce that much programmability on Zcash, but rather to introduce a privacy-preserving bridge to let's say Anoma or some other protocol that does have native programmability. And we like this idea because, yeah, all you're changing on Zcash is the ability to support a bridge. And you're sort of delegating the actual programmability to, say, Anoma. So, however, this is still an invasive change because a secure privacy-preserving bridge requires the introduction of some threshold validator set, and we're going to see why. So we're going to take it in both directions. The first direction is, let's say, going from Zcash to Anoma. So over here, the user basically spends their note to the escrow address, and they encrypt the value of the note to this threshold of validators that we've introduced. Now, Anoma is running a Zcash Lite client and is watching for the inclusion of notes meant for their chain. So when they see a new note commitment and they validate that Zcash consensus has agreed on this commitment, Anoma proceeds to mint this note on their chain. And so now anyone who knows the note plaintext can spend it on Anoma now. So this direction is pretty simple. It's the other direction that is trickier. So look, we're on Anoma, and they have exchanges. They have like NFTs and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. So we're spending our wrapped Zec arbitrarily and freely. And then at some point, maybe some subset of wrapped Zec owners on Anoma decide they want to go back to the Zcash chain. They want to cash out. So what they do is they burn these wrapped Zec to the mint and burn contract. And once again, they encrypt the values of these notes to the threshold of validators. And by the threshold of validators, I mean those on Zcash. And then the Zcash chain is also running an Anoma Lite client. And once they're convinced of the inclusion of these burnt notes, what they're going to do is, and here's why we need the threshold validators, what they're going to do is check that this invariant is conserved. So they're going to check that the amount burnt on Anoma does not exceed the amount escrowed on Zcash. And this guards against the situation where, let's say, the foreign chain becomes Byzantine and tries to increase the Zcash supply using this bridge. So we can never sort of burn more money than we have, even across chains. That's the point of this threshold encryption, is to check this invariant in a privacy-preserving way. So once this check passes, then Zcash mints these notes, and whoever knew the note commitments on the note plaintext on Anoma can now spend them on Zcash. So this is, by the way, my understanding of what Anoma described, and all mistakes are mine.
So I just wanted to add that there is like two other ways. I think maybe we changed the slides a bit too late, but there's like another direction that is basically the direction that Kedit is taking right now, which is to add like specific functionality, right? Like we have this vision or ideal that, you know, we want to add programmability because we want to code everything and be able to do any application. But that has two real like challenges that I don't think we've solved yet. One is that first, we maybe don't need all types of applications or all types of programmability on chain. And two is that actually we are giving maybe too much freedom for the developers to build something that they don't really know if it's secure. Whereas when we do this in a kind of more, let's say, proactive approach by adding specific functionality, and of course it can take a while, but let's say like in a few years we can have the major kind of DeFi components on Zcash, Well, that seems pretty much like pretty good to have like a good user base. You know, at the end of the day, how much more has been done in Ethereum that actually created adoption, right? Like, okay, games and stuff. Let's put that aside for a second. And the other direction is kind of what Aztec was doing, which is like do the on-chain kind of execution, have like the specific programmability be part of the consensus itself. So those are like two otherwise. Those definitely are like more intense and work intense and will change the protocol a lot more. And in terms of future work, so first of all, of course, like we're still in the middle of this project. We're now hoping to kind of crystallize certain aspects. This is kind of an initial kind of table of contents for the actual paper. Our goal is to publish this work. We want to really focus on formalizing privacy and security definitions, because this is, I think, one of the benefits of having a type of SOK work, where you can actually like formalize things that then can be continually used afterwards, right? Like so far, let's say that like most of these protocols that we've spoken of today, I would dare to even say all, don't have a proof of security as a protocol, right? So, okay, so maybe that's too much to ask in some cases. I feel like we're advancing too fast in these, like very fast in this industry, so that like we can allow ourselves to not be super, you know, fine-grained with the security proofs. But having specific security definitions would help all of these protocols to kind of map these security definitions into the protocols. And similar with privacy. Some people are talking about, you know, ledger indistinguishability. Others are talking about unlinkability. Others are talking about, etc. So we really want to try to formalize these things, and it's really difficult. So
Yeah, our colleague Brian has been looking into universal composability because basically lots of these protocols involve parts beyond just the ideal functionality. And so to try and capture it meaningfully, we might need to go beyond those very theoretical definitions in, say, Zerocash paper.
yeah. We're also thinking about kind of what are the common classes of privacy-preserving applications. So today we presented kind of the framework and what are some examples of these applications, but really what we want to try is to kind of understand what are the meaningful differences between the applications that create an extra need for functionality at the protocol level, right? Like, for example, right, Zcash can now support, let's say, ZSA, but it cannot support swaps because that's an extra functionality, right? So in the context of programmability, that also exists in some contexts. Like Penumbra is also not fully programmable, right? So we're aware of those, and we want to kind of try to pinpoint them. And also sort of what are the best practices for designing these, right? And here it's kind of similar, right? Like what are the minimal protocol level primitives needed, right? So can we like bring down all these functionalities to the essential kind of functionalities and primitives? And can we actually implement those well and audited and in a secure way so that we can help ensure the user or developer's application security? Yeah, so that's for now. Hopefully we'll have more to present soon. Any questions?
Oh, how can we make programmable Zcash secure against basically hardware level attacks?
Against code exploits and processor memory disclosure attacks.
Against code exploits and processor memory disclosure attacks.
I'm not sure. I think like we're not too, like we're still a bit far from getting again like, from this opinion on how to make it work. I think like from code exploits, it's really difficult to. I think it's also a little bit perpendicular, to be honest. It's not clear.
I think we could best answer this question relative to a specific proposal for integrating programmable privacy, and we provided a few in pretty much ascending order of invasiveness, and I think each of these, introduces additional security assumptions to an extent. So if you add Zaxi like arbitrary functionality, then you're allowing users to, for example, create trivially de-anonymizing programs. You could absolutely do that. You could make zero knowledge proofs for like a fundamentally de-anonymizing program. For example, in this TEE case, you have lots of side channels that can happen on TEEs, but you could find ways to mitigate this. For example, Andrew Miller suggested using FHE as a primitive and using TEE just for the threshold encryption part. So have each TEE node hold one share of the encryption key. And so this sort of defense in depth, like reducing our reliance on security assumptions that we don't understand, I think is generally the strategy that will win out and that will provide security, even when we introduce like fancier types of programmability. And when it comes to bridges, it's like a whole nother game. It's like economics, for example, considering the probability of the other chain becoming Byzantine, considering like the value of the native assets on each chain, considering like smart contract bugs on the other chain. So in short, we don't know, and we could probably answer this better offline and in relation to a specific proposal.
Great. Great. Well, we're out of time, so thank you very much, Ying Tong and Daniel.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in 7 minutes with Kartik Nayak from Duke University, who's going to be talking about privacy, preserving proof of stake, and what the trade-offs are with regards to safety, liveness, and privacy. So we'll see you then. 7 minutes, please. Please be on time.
feel lost. Tears roll down face, sad old face. Sometimes you fall in a hole. Part of the raindrops bring me home.
Ajá, volvemos a estar aquí en break. Creo que dieron unos minuticos, 7, 8 minutos de break. La gente salió a hidratarse, a comer frutica. Aquí lo que nos falta es comida. Vamos a dar otra vueltica, a ver a quién nos conseguimos por allí, con quién podemos hablar. Vamos a ver. Bueno, la logística impecable, bebidas de todo tipo. Aquí está Mr. Valenzuela. Esto es transmitiendo para Zcash vía Telegram. ¿Speak Spanish? Más o menos. ¿Qué te ha parecido lo que has visto hasta ahora? ¿Te ha gustado? ¿Tú vas a tener una presentación, no? ¿Sí? El lunes. Ah, ok. Bueno, conversaremos más. Luego nos tomamos la foto. El ambiente es muy relajado. Por allí nos preguntaban que qué tal la formalidad. Fíjense el estilo, miren el estilo. En bermudas, la gente en cholas. Bueno, esto es muy chilado. Comida. Esto, yo no sé qué es esto. Esto parece. No sé, yo voy a tener que probar. Ah, perdón, aquí dice pollo marinado con champiñones y palitos de pan. Miren, yo de verdad no quiero comer nada, estoy full. Salmorejo con brochetas de ceviche de gambas. Ensalada de verduras asadas con vinagreta de Jerez. Mucho vegano también por acá he visto. Y bueno, estamos por supuesto los carnívoros. Alegres con el tema del jamón ibérico y todo este tema. Permiso por aquí. Miren, los que me estaban pidiendo search, yo voy a llevar, miren. Ah, miren, pero aquí hay search nueva, miren esta. ¿Será que este año sí tenemos actualización de Nighthawk? Ajá, esta no la tenía. Aquí está. Nighthawk. Miren, estos espacios están chéverísimos. Unos muebles. Ya en 5 minutos creo que entramos. Están haciendo señas por allá. Los que quieren utilizar tapabocas. He visto solamente 2 personas con tapabocas. Bueno, miren aquí esta belleza. La cebra. La famosa cebra de colores. Aquí identificación de algunas personas que no han llegado. Y bueno, miren quién viene por aquí. La jefa. Bueno, ahora yo te cedo aquí esto. Transmite. Mientras.
¿Cómo están? Bueno, miren, ahí están viendo. Ahí está. Miren que está aquí. Say hi to Venezuela. Say hi to Venezuela, Matthew. Ajá, miren, Venezuela.
Matthew.
Mucho Nighthawk. Así que aquí está el equipo de Nighthawk en plena. Ajá, miren. Bueno, ahí están viendo, miren a Paco. Saluda aquí a la gente de Venezuela.
Hola a todos mis hermanos de Venezuela. Quiero mucho, espero que estén bien.
Ah, bueno, ahí está. Bueno, estamos viendo mucha gente de la que está aquí en la Zcon4, que se está viendo de todo cuando estamos aquí en los pasillos donde pasan las cosas muy interesantes. Así que estamos
Señorita, una pregunta, ¿dónde están los baños?
de todo lo que está sucediendo.
Ah, gracias.
Gente que está haciendo cosas increíbles, así que están enterándose de muchas cosas también. Por ahí les digo que había muchísima comida, muchísimos aperitivos, muchas cosas que están sucediendo. Ya va a llegar la hora del almuerzo, así que van a estar viendo todo lo que va a estar sucediendo acá en los pasillos de la Zcon4. Espero que estén disfrutando muchísimo, déjenos sus comentarios, inviten a más gente que se conecte por aquí a las transmisiones en vivo. Miren todo lo que se está viendo por aquí, esto es un rompecabezas y bueno, en las mesas se están armando las piezas, bueno, están sucediendo muchas cosas, ahí está, mosaico interactivo para que se puedan enterar de algunas cosas que están sucediendo aquí en la Zcon. Y bueno, miren, por allá vemos a Michael, está por ahí conversando con representantes de Zcash Community Grants. Por ahí ven a Nate Wilcox, el hermano de Zuko. Bueno, hay gente de todas partes del mundo aquí y todo el mundo contento. Aquí está mucha gente y todo el mundo contento y por supuesto, bueno, aquí estamos. Venezuela is in the house. ¿Qué tal? Cuéntenos por ahí en los comentarios. Dicen que no se ve bien. ¿Por qué será? Cuéntenos. A ver.
You ready?
Cuenten a ver si se está viendo mejor. Puede ser quizás
Okay,
la
ladies and
conexión de
gentlemen, we're going to
internet.
get started again. We are
Ya vamos
2
a
minutes
entrar a las
behind.
conferencias nuevamente, así que
I think it's
después
pretty
vamos a
good
estar
so far.
compartiendo
Let's see if
en
we can keep
directo
that
más
sort of
cositas. Cuídense
level
muchísimo
of
y nos vemos
delay
pronto. Chao.
going through to the end of the day. So next up, I'd like to introduce Kartik Nayak from Duke University, who we commissioned to do some, well, whose research we have funded into certain aspects of privacy, preserving proof of stake, and what the trade-offs are with regards to safety, liveness, and privacy. And I'm sure that Kartik will do a far better job of explaining that than I can, but thank you very much, Kartik, for coming here.
Thank you so much, Jack, for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here. And as Jack mentioned, I'll be talking about privacy and private proof of stake protocols. Or in other words, can private proof of stake protocols achieve all of safety, liveness, and privacy? So let me start off with something that we all know about, Bitcoin, proof of work blockchain, where the key goal is to achieve consensus, where parties or miners agree on an ever-growing ledger of transactions. So an example over here to the right, you can see Alice, Bob, and Charlie, who are trying to update this blockchain on their own. So these miners, as well as the users of the blockchain, are connected to each other on a P2P network. So whenever a user, let's say Karthik, let's say I pay $10 to Jack or 10 ZEC to Jack, I put it up on the P2P network. It will eventually be received by one of these miners, let's say Bob, and Bob would share it with everyone else, Charlie and others. So to include this transaction onto the chain, all of these miners agree, all of these miners actually compete with one another to produce the next block, to produce the next proof of work. And this computation turns out to be energy intensive, and eventually someone wins. Let's say Bob wins over here, and Bob includes a block which has this transaction. And eventually Bob will share this transaction with everyone. So winning this proof of work is directly proportional to the amount of computation power you put in. So the more compute power you have in, the higher is the probability that you will produce the next block. So you have two key properties that holds. One is safety and one is liveness. Safety says that no two miners will disagree on the sequence of transactions. And liveness says that whenever you send in a transaction to this chain, it will eventually be included in the ledger. And with Bitcoin, you achieve both of these properties so far as honest parties hold a majority of the computation power. With Bitcoin, you have no privacy in this system. Any party can see the sender-receiver value involved in the transaction. So that's a proof of work blockchain, which has a very high energy consumption due to the creation of proof of work. And that's why people have been investigating the use of proof of stake, where parties are elected proportional to their stake. Example protocols today include Ethereum, Algorand, and Ouroboros. And the assumption over here changes from an honest majority computation power to an honest majority, a 67% majority stake, right? And the techniques, instead of using proof of work, you may end up using some other self-selection techniques. As an example, you would use something like a verifiable random function, which allows you to generate a unique verifiable random value that cannot be predicted by an adversary who does not have access to your secret stake. So with proof of stake blockchains, again, you have safety and liveness under the honest majority stake assumption. And again, you still don't have privacy. And I'll add one more point over here compared to what I was saying earlier. So in addition to learning everything about the transaction, you also know the creator of the block, because proof of stake is less permissionless compared to something like a proof of work system. So you know all the stakers involved, and you know which staker has created the block. So you can make proof of work blockchains energy efficient by moving to proof of stake. The other dimension to think about is privacy. And over there, that is where Zcash is. So you can hide the transactions using cryptography. At a high level, the kind of guarantee you give when you're creating a transaction is to say that you basically provide a zero-knowledge proof to say that there is a sender who has sent some money to a receiver, and the sender has access to these funds. Very, very high level. And if you do this, with a protocol like Zcash, you can achieve safety, liveness, and privacy. In particular, this is required for the functioning of any blockchain, and I'll call this out because I'll be using this later. You would typically know, a sender and a receiver would typically know, when its transaction is committed, or which block contains its transaction. So with this, you can move from a proof of work blockchain to one that provides you privacy as well. So it seems like these are two different improvements in two different directions, and a natural question to ask is, hey, can we get both of these? Can we get the best of both worlds? One direction gives you privacy but not energy efficiency. The other direction gives you energy efficiency but not privacy. And with private proof of stake, you'll get the best of both worlds. And indeed, I'm not the first person to ask this question. Even 4 years ago with Ouroboros, Cryptsinos, as well as this other work by Ganesh Orlandi and Shudi, they've already come up with protocols that can actually give you a private proof of stake. And the key observation that they had was, all of the parameters or the ways of getting both of these properties, they align except for one fact. And that is, there is an additional leakage in proof of stake protocols. And that is that the creator of the block is known. And the basic question they ask is, hey, can we hide the identity of this creator? And instead of using a VRF, they use, intuitively speaking, some notion of an anonymous VRF. And it basically has all the properties of a VRF, but you hide the identity of the creator of the block. And this kind of separates, so with this, you do not know who the creator is. And at least intuitively speaking, you should obtain all of the guarantees that you did with private proof of work blockchains. So with that, you achieve a private proof of stake blockchain. Thus, we have a proof of stake blockchain with privacy, safety, and liveness. Or do we? So this is the question that we asked a couple of years ago. And for this, from a protocol standpoint, it seems things are fine. But if you try to go down at the network layer, if you look closely, this prior work on Cryptsinos, they have a footnote which says, if you assume an anonymous broadcast channel at the network layer, then the submitter or the block proposer would not be leaked. Okay, and what this is saying is, at the network layer, if you try to tap on to who is sending what messages, perhaps you would still learn who is sending these messages, and that can reveal your stake. So at a high level, they argue, hey, someone who's spoofing your network, even then, so far as you use some sort of an anonymous broadcast communication channel, your network level metadata will stay hidden, and everything would be okay. So what we observed is that, even with anonymous broadcast channels, we can potentially learn the stake of a party. And the key attack idea that we used, the key fact that we used is the following. In a chain, I can identify my own transaction in the chain. And somehow, if I can manipulate the network, then I can create a situation where the mempool of a victim party is different from the mempool of someone else, from all other miners, for example, or all other stakers, for example. So in general, if I can control which party receives my transaction for some period of time, then I can potentially know who mined the block. So let me try to be a little more concrete. Let's say I'm an adversary and I create this red transaction. And I share this with some party P at time t. Okay, so over here you see two timelines. The first is the timeline for party P, and the second is the timeline for everyone else. Party P receives this transaction at time t, and everyone else receives this transaction some time later, some delta time later. Okay, where delta is a parameter. So how do you actually achieve this delay in practice? You can just rely on a regular network delay. That may not be a lot in practice though. You can try to eclipse this party P, or you can use some sort of networking layer P2P level details on trying to actually delay this message. For example, to achieve communication efficiency at the network layer, all of these protocols, starting with Bitcoin, they use what is called as an in-blocking mechanism, where you send the message, the entire block, only if a node actually has it. It turns out that you can use this, an adversary can use this to its advantage to actually create a temporary difference in the mempools of different parties. So far as you can achieve this, all the adversary now needs to do is observe the state of the network and observe when these blocks are created. So let's say, for example, this red transaction that the adversary created came at time tk. All right? And if that happens, all the adversary needs to check is, how tk is related to t plus delta. In particular, if tk is less than t plus delta, and this is the time at which, only party P had access to the red transaction, and it must be the case that party P is the one who mined this block. So this gives you a very simple mechanism to know or to sample how many times a party is elected, and this is directly related to its stake. You may ask, well, this happens only because of what the party has for delta time. So can it just ignore the transactions received in the last delta time, or does such a fix actually work, right? Or some similar fix, does it work? And it turns out that such fixes do not work, and intuitively it's because you can actually create a similar attack on a different time scale. In fact, we actually extended this intuition, and I'm not going to get into this, but we actually showed a lower bound that connects privacy, safety, and liveness, or to be more specific, anonymity, safety, and liveness. So I'm not going to talk about this, but I think the high-level point that we are trying to make over here is that there is a fundamental barrier to achieving all these three when we formally define these in a very specific way. Although a caveat of what we do over here also says, our attack is very specific to, or a lower bound is very specific to deterministic blockchain protocols, and none of the proof of stake blockchains are deterministic. But having said that, so far as the logically that the lower bound should still hold, the intuition should still hold for all of the protocols, unless you're specifically using randomization for privacy. So in the rest of my talk, I'm going to do two things. One, I will explain a simple attack using the sampling mechanism that we described. And then I will speak about, what can we do to actually counter this lower bound. So there are two attacks that we came up with. So the first one is called as a reverse tagging attack. And this applies to any deterministic blockchain that provides a guarantee which says, if a transaction is sent to all honest parties, that is the strongest condition you can ask for, then it will be in the output. And let's say our goal is to identify a bound on the stake of some party, say some victim P. So here's what the attack looks like. So let's say you have this victim P to the left. You have the adversary to the right. Let's say I'm going to split the adversarial stake into 5 different stake values, A1 through A5. And all the other parties, let's say P1 to P4, are in between. I will note that from a protocol standpoint, the adversary actually behaves honestly all through and only chooses its input. At the network layer, it is going to do the kind of manipulation that I was suggesting earlier, where it is going to ensure that some parties receive this block and some parties do not. Okay, so to start off with, let's say there is this red transaction that the adversary creates and shares it with everyone except victim P. Let's say at the end of this, a block is produced, and it contains this transaction. What can we say we learn from this? Actually, it turns out that we can learn nothing from this process. It's because the blockchain says, if you've sent this to all honest parties, and note that over here, so when I say all honest parties, 1 minus f fraction of the stake, and over here adversary is behaving as honest. So it contributes towards this 1 minus f. So what we say is, so far as you send this transaction to 1 minus f of the stake, at that point, it would be output in the block. But the protocol can be nicer, and in that even if it is sent to a fewer set of parties, it can still output. So just the fact that the transaction is output over here does not mean much. So we'll repeat this attack with a different red transaction, but now the adversary does not play with all of these red transactions. For example, A5 will not play with the red transactions. It will behave as if it never had this red transaction. And you keep repeating this process until you reach a stage where you have a block which does not contain a red transaction. At this point, we can hopefully conclude something, and that is, our blockchain says, so far as you send the stake to 1 minus f fraction of the parties, at that point, it had to be output. The fact that it is not output implies that it is not a part, that the sum of parties who had this red transaction is not 1 minus f. So less than 1 minus a fraction of stakers played with this red transaction. And now you can argue that, the adversary knows how much stake it has and how much of it did not play with this red transaction. And with that, you can actually do some simple arithmetic and compute a bound on P stake. And over here, it turns out to be greater than f minus d, where d is the fraction that did not play. D is the fraction of the adversarial stake that did not play with this red transaction. So intuitively, this gives you an idea of what an adversary can do. At the same time, there are drawbacks with this attack. It's assuming a deterministic protocol with a stringent liveness condition. It is only giving you a one-sided bound. It is saying that an adversary, that a party stake is greater than f minus d, not how much greater than this value. And finally, in terms of the strategy used to actually perform this attack, it is using an inefficient linear strategy, so it will require multiple trials. So the cost for an adversary to actually perform such an attack is fairly high. It turns out that we can address all of these concerns. So this is an attack that we described in our work for 2 years earlier, and we have some recent work which will be published in Usenix Security next week, where we address actually all of these concerns to come up with a new set of attacks where your liveness condition need not be so stringent. Even with the probabilistic liveness condition, all that says is, if you send it to more honest parties, the faster it is that it will be included in the chain. With such a liveness condition as well, you can carry out such an attack. And the bound, instead of giving you a one-sided bound, you can actually get a bound that is arbitrarily close to the true stake. And finally, in terms of the attack efficiency, we can improve it drastically by employing some sort of binary search-like strategy in logarithmic time. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into the details of this particular attack, and rather spend my time asking, well, there are these attacks possible, there are these lower bounds. Does that mean we can never have a private POS protocol with privacy, safety, and liveness? So at some level, our lower bound kind of hints at there being a fundamental barrier between the three. So you cannot, if we define all of these properties in a stringent manner, then perhaps we cannot achieve all these three simultaneously. But well, can we obtain any sort of a trade-off between these three properties? I think that's the next natural question. In particular, can we trade off either safety for privacy or liveness for privacy? So in this talk, I'm going to explore, can we perhaps trade off safety for privacy? And here's a potential approach. So intuitively speaking, the reason why our attack works is because you're able to sample how many times a party is elected using proof of stake. and this sampling is directly related to its true stake, right? So that is what allows us to learn the stake of a party. So what if proposals are elected instead of, through the stake? What if proposals are elected with equal weights for every party? So at that point, their stake is not revealed at all, right? Does this work? Well, if you think about it for 10 seconds, you'll realize that this trivially does not work, because we'll have no Sybil resistance whatsoever. Because at that point, adversary will come in, with little stake and, with a lot of parties, and all of the blocks will be produced by the adversarial parties, right? So this is not at all secure under proof of stake. So what this tells us is that, on the one end, if everything is representing the true stake of a party, at that point, you can learn it. On the other, you cannot be entirely independent of the stake either. On one end, you're giving up privacy entirely. At the other, you're giving up safety entirely. So for safety, your stake still needs to be proportionate to, if not exactly the same as the true stake. So given this intuition, our idea is to not represent the true stake of a party, but use some sort of a noisy stake for each party. Okay, so over here on the left, you're seeing a histogram of, on the x-axis, the different parties, and on the y-axis, their stake. So in this example, there are 5 different parties. So what we argue is we can perhaps perturb or noise the stake of each of these parties in such a way that for all of the election purposes or proof of stake purposes, what is used is this noisy stake. Okay, so as an example, for the first party, the noisy version, after you perturb it, the stake increases slightly. For the second party, it decreases slightly, and so on and so forth. If you do this, then intuitively, hopefully, this is what is revealed to an adversary. And the high-level intuition over here is now the adversary can only infer this distorted stake. And at that point, differences in stake due to smaller transactions are hidden. So if this noise is adjusted appropriately in such a way that you're trying to hide transactions of a certain size, you're still able to do so in this process. So again, if you do, a $10 million transaction, or, something that represents, let's say, a large percentage of the entirety of Zcash, ZC, at that point, it is still hard to hide, what is happening, the change of stake that happens. But for smaller transactions, perhaps you can still guarantee something. Right? So there are several challenges. So I'm explaining the very high-level idea over here, and there are several challenges that need to be met before we can achieve this. For one, if I'm noising the stake, how do I ensure that an adversary is noising it correctly? So it needs to submit some sort of a proof that it has done this correctly as per the specification. So I'm talking about noise at a very imprecise level right now, but we need to be able to appropriately select this so that we can meaningfully reason about privacy over here. If we are distorting the stake, then this can result in an increase of distorted stake for an adversary. As an example over here, if the first and the fifth party are adversarial, then the stake increased. And in this election process, in the proof of stake process, you want the adversary to be, say, less than 33%, then this distorted stake should be less than 33%, which means the actual adversarial stake that you're tolerating is even lesser, let's say 25%. So you're trading off safety for privacy over there. And finally, I think I spoke about noising this once, but the stake keeps changing over time, right? So you need to account for doing this multiple times at intermittent intervals. So we address all of these challenges using what is called differential privacy. So we define, we describe differential privacy mechanisms, which is the gold standard for achieving privacy in such settings. And I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what we do over here, but at a very high level, the guarantee you get is that your adversary cannot distinguish the stake for a single party by up to some parameter, some additive parameter alpha. So you're trying to hide transactions of size alpha, for instance. Or more concretely, an adversary can distinguish between a victim's unknown stake X and a guess value Y if x minus y is greater than alpha. So to evaluate, what kind of guarantees we would get for the mechanisms we described, we actually performed a case study on Ethereum's parameters because those were very well described. And over here, we're trying to showcase the kind of trade-offs we are making in this process. So on the y-axis, you see this parameter alpha, which is intuitively you can think of it as, I'm trying to hide transactions of size alpha. And on the x-axis, you see this parameter epsilon, which I have not spoken about at all until now. But in differential privacy, you can think of it as, higher epsilon implies lower privacy. So we're trying to go higher on the y-axis, that is good, because you're trying to hide larger transactions, and left on the x-axis, that is good, because that implies high privacy. And the three curves that you see over here are, the different adversarial stakes that we are trying to tolerate in the process. So as I described earlier, after distortion, your stake the adversarial stake can increase. So the true adversary that you can tolerate is smaller. Right? So over here, we're thinking about three different adversaries, f equals 20%, 30%, and 25%. So a first observation that you can make is there is an inherent privacy utility trade-off over here. And let's say we pick f equals 20% as an example. That is the blue curve over here. At that point, you can see that as alpha increases, that is, if you go higher up on over here, you keep going to the right, which means epsilon increases as well, and your privacy decreases. So intuitively, as you try to hide larger and larger transactions, the probabilistic guarantee that you're getting per transaction reduces. Second, as the adversary changes, or based on how much reduction of safety you're trying to achieve, there is an effect on alpha and epsilon. So as you go from towards lesser and lesser adversaries, as f decreases, or as you move from the green to red to the blue curve, you can observe two things. If you keep one of these parameters fixed, let's say if you fix privacy or if you fix epsilon, that is, you're going up over here. At that point, you can see that you are able to tolerate a larger alpha. So for a fixed privacy, as the adversary reduces, you can hide larger transactions, which is intuitively true. I think it's formally bounding over here. And similarly, if you fix the size of a transaction, alpha in this case, then as you move from green to red to blue, you can see you're going to the left, which means you're obtaining lesser epsilon or stronger privacy. So with that, I have explained all of this at a very high level, but I'll share appropriate resources for you to read to learn more about this. So with that, I'll conclude my talk. We said there's a fundamental barrier to obtain all three properties simultaneously. Second, we discussed reverse tagging attacks and stake inference attacks, which are very specific attacks. So we did not speak about this, but our attacks very much rely on network level manipulation, which means, while network level defenses cannot entirely eliminate these attacks, but in practice, they may be helpful in mitigating at least these attacks. And finally, we spoke about the use of differential privacy at the protocol layer to trade off between safety, liveness, and privacy. So we spoke about trading off safety for privacy, but perhaps one can also do something similar to trade off liveness for privacy. So before ending my talk, I would like to thank my collaborators from NCSU, Edinburgh, and at Duke University. So this is based off of two works, one published in Oakland 21 a couple of years ago. And the second one is in Usenix Security, which would be in a week's time. So for more details about this talk, I explained it at a high level. There are more details on our blog post on decentralized thoughts. Those are the links. And they also have links to the papers in case you want to learn more in even more detail. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kartik. It's time just for one question, and that is, Are there any downsides to preserving the privacy of block creators, in your opinion?
Sorry, come again? Are
Are
there
there any downsides or risks
Mhm.
to concealing and preserving the privacy of the block creators?
So there are no downsides to concealing it. I think what our observation is that does not suffice to actually give you privacy. So existing works, right? I think the ones that I cited from 2019, they already hide the creators of the block. I think what we are arguing is that there are other side channels through which you can still learn the information that you are trying to hide at the protocol layer. So if you think about it, you can think about it at different layers. So from a protocol layer standpoint, life is good. But when you go back, when you go down at the network layer, at that point, you can still perhaps learn information. And that can be bad. It was not a concern with proof of work blockchains because the amount of money you hold was not related to your consensus mechanism at all. It was proof of work that was allowing you to propose. With proof of stake, that's not true. It is now related to your stake.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And we're going to break for lunch now. Lunch is right out here. After lunch, we will be splitting into 2 tracks. Track 1 will be in here, and track 2 will be right next door. In here, we'll have a few regulatory focus sessions, and then next door we'll have ML, Ian, and I can't remember who else, Naomi Brockwell, talking about various aspects of privacy, whether Zcash has morals, and then Naomi's talk will be about the fundamentals of privacy. So yeah, enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you after the break.
It's not.